You didn't announce it. Okay, welcome tonight to the Journal of Expressive Writing feature and open mic. This is February 27th, 2025. We're so glad to share with you our invited guest as a featured author, editor tonight, Louis Bourgeois. And he will be giving a reading to us very shortly, followed by 15 writers who are reading from the open mic. And let me introduce to you now Jen Minotti, founder and editor of the Journal of Expressive Writing. She's the reason we're here. Jen, you want to say a quick hello to everybody?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Kelly. I just want to say thank you so much to everyone here tonight, and especially to Louis for joining us and sharing. Boy, this wonderful wonderful collection of stories that I've just been just touched my heart. So yeah, the journal and this open mic series. We uh we love providing a voice for all writers, and especially and I feel, I don't know, I'm kind of like a little verklempt here because I feel especially tonight to give voice to traditionally neglected voices in the publishing world. I just feel so proud to have Louis here tonight to share his voice and the voice of many people that he's working with. So again, so thank you, and back to you, Kelly.
Thank you, Jen. I want to introduce Katarina Konen, who is a fabulous writer and supporter of this open mic. Where did you go, my dear? There she is. Katarina, want to unmute and just say hello? Katarina is going to be working behind the scenes to make our open mic run incredibly smoothly by so you can communicate anything you need to Katarina Konen if you have a question. Katarina, want to say hello?
Hi. I just noticed that I have a couple of people where they may or may not be here because their name may or may not match what they signed up under. So if you're one of them, you'll get a direct message from me. So I will check whether you are the person who signed up or somebody else with a similar name, but not the same. Okay.
So thank you so much, Katarina. And I also want to mention, so if you need to communicate a question about the open mic, write to Katarina, direct message, or to Jen if you can't seem to figure out how to do that for any reason. And she'll help you rename yourself, or at least she'll find out that you're here. It's very easy to rename yourself by going to, the top, the little ellipses at the top right corner of your little Hollywood square picture. When you see that ellipses, if you press on that and you scroll all the way down, the links to the very bottom, it says rename. That's how you would put in a different name. And it disappears after the time that you use it tonight. So it's not like you're going to be stealing your Zoom account from your spouse or your child or something. So please feel free to rename yourself if you need to. What we do with the recording, by the way, is we post it on our Journal of Expressive Writing YouTube link so that you can rewatch it. You can share the link with others that you think might be interested in watching it. That'll be going out from Jen via email in the next couple of days. Those of you who've been here before know that I like to bring a poem to sort of get us beginning to warm up and our sense of community and our listening and our compassion, our empathy, and our creativity with a poem. And tonight I thought I would read The Light Comes Brighter by Theodore Rutke as our opening poem, because I want you to be thinking about, maybe particularly with this topic that we are going to be talking about tonight, inmates writing. I thought this leafy mind that Rutke mentions in this poem really appealed to me as a beautiful metaphor for a way to sort of have our minds be open and receptive. The light comes brighter. The light comes brighter from the east. The caw of restive crows is sharper on the ear. A walker at the river's edge may hear a cannon crack announce an early thaw. The sun cuts deep into the heavy drift, though still the guarded snow is winter sealed. At bridgeheads buckled ice begins to shift. The river overflows the level field. Once more the trees assume familiar shapes as branches loose last vestiges of snow. The water stored in narrow pools escapes in rivulets. The cold roots stir below. Soon field and wood will wear an April look. The frost be gone, for green is breaking now. The oven bird will match the vocal brook. The young fruits swell upon the pear tree bough. And soon a branch, part of a hidden scene, the leafy mind that long was tightly furled, will turn its private substance into green, and young shoots spread upon our inner world. Thank you, Theodore Ruttke. I want to introduce our guest for this evening, Louis Bourgeois, who is Executive Director of the Mississippi Prison Rights Initiative. It's a nonprofit providing training in basic literacy and creative writing for incarcerated Mississippians. Louis is also editor-in-chief at Vox Press, which just published Unit 29, Writing from Parchman Prison. It's a collection of writings from over 30 Mississippi inmates housed in the infamously brutal Unit 29 at Mississippi State Penitentiary, better known as Parchman Farm. I want to tell you a little bit about Vox Press. It's a 501c3 arts organization based in Oxford, Mississippi. Its mission is to encourage, promote, and provide opportunities for the creation and public presentation of literature, art, and other creative works by individuals and groups traditionally neglected by the mainstream publishing industry, the academy, and other public venues and institutions. Now, about Unit 29, Writing from Parchman Prison. It's a collection of writings from over 30 Mississippi inmates. Excuse me. Right in the dent, right in there. Sorry, that's my grandson. I'm telling you about Unit 29, Writing from Parchman Prison, the book. It's not a comfortable literary work, but rather a cry for help from deep within a monstrous and insatiable beast known as Unit 29 Parchman. And the book was made possible by the Vox Press and their educational outreach program, Mississippi Prison Rights Initiative. I want to tell you also a quote from what the writer from the Arts Views here in Boston, Bill Littlefield, wrote about this book. An argument for this collection might be that anything anyone writes from prison should be published, since whatever it is, it will inform readers regarding the grim circumstances about 2 million of our fellow citizens endure every day, day after day. Thanks for being here, Louis. Welcome.
Thank you, Kelly. Really honored to be doing this. This I do think this is important, and the reason why I think it's important, I mean, you guys around Boston, for example, this kind of prison education program is pretty old hat, but in Mississippi, it's still relatively new. Our organization, I think it's fair to say, initiated creative workshops, initially creative writing workshops, and now we're doing meditation, we're doing art workshops and whatnot. But I think it's safe to say that in Mississippi, we were the first ones to go after inmate writing and and publish inmate writing. It had not really been done prior to our wish to do so. And about 3.5 years ago, it was actually Parchman itself. This was after you guys, I'm sure, heard about the riots and so forth in late 2019 and in early 2020 that broke out in various buildings in 29 during right at the beginning of the pandemic. It was actually Parchment itself. After the pandemic had lifted somewhat, they were trying to figure out, you know, what to do back in 29, and they actually requested our presence to attempt to set up these writing workshops, which we had done for years. And they thought, I suppose they thought it would be like a kind of a stress reliever. And so I began working the zones initially by myself. Eventually I would have some help from fellow instructors from the University of Mississippi, because initially we were working with the segregated population of the prison, and so they could not be taken out to a proper workshop scenario. Of course, in 29 there was not really a place to have a class except for the gymnasium, and eventually we did end up out front. But the first 2 years of work in this book takes place actually in the zones, where we just kind of worked one-on-one with inmates to evoke or to solicit their stories. And so this is our fourth collection, primarily from Parchment. And because of the intensity of the situation back in 29, I had made an executive decision to not sugarcoat anything. And in fact, I went out of my way to try to produce a collection of work that was not sugarcoated by any kind of literary pretense. I wanted to see if it was possible to, in writing, to get an unadulterated type of experience onto the page. Because I mean, to me, I mean, what interests me the most is that all these people in this book, and I do think this is an important book. I do think this is an important cultural and historical document, but none of these people had any kind of literary background, which is exactly what I wanted, actually. I did not want any kind of artifice. I did not want anything that was not, I didn't want anything that was strained with pretensions, I guess you might say. And I think we got that. I mean, I think it's kind of amazing that you can take a group of people who never even thought about writing, and in most cases had no concept of writing, you know, in the sense that we understand it, because I'm sure most of us are from English departments in one way or another. And just, you know, show them some examples of what is possible with inmate prison literature, and see where they take it. And that's exactly what happened. And I gotta say, I'm quite pleased. You have to understand. So, like when I was teaching, you know, back in the zones, and the zones that we were teaching were segregated zones, which means that this population of inmates could not be they could not mix the general population because of issues they had within the prison itself, and so they're basically locked away for extended periods of time. These folks, they could not express themselves other than through the written word and through our class, and so we just wanted to see how far we could take that. And some of this stuff, you know, is just absolutely incredible. We did use literature as a template for them. And which is amazing, I guess, when you lock someone away like that, you know, and they can look at an essay and study it all week, they can really come away with some examples of what can be done. And I think we got some great stuff, as I say, with people who had no kind of literary heritage whatsoever. And it's like they kind of invented their own. But there's this book is, you know, this book is the result of 3 years of going back into the zones and 29. And eventually we did have a formal class in the gymnasium in Unit 29 for about 8 months. And that, you know, we got some good work out of that as well, but it is a different texture than from the work that we got actually being in where they live. And it was kind of a relief too, because being back in the zones with them was quite challenging at times, simply because it's very loud back there because they're in segregation. Therefore, they have to shout to communicate. So when you first go back there, you think there's just something horrific going on, but really it's just people communicating, right? Because they can't be let out of their areas, so they shout everything. So it's incredibly loud in that regard. And then it's a two-tier situation back there in 29. So they have 3 large televisions bolted to these enormous iron pillars in the middle of the zone. And these TVs are blaring all the time. So that adds a texture of noise that is unbearable. And then not to mention that you have apparently back there, people communicate issues they may have with the prison guards, or even within the prison population itself, through fires, right? So about 6 months before we arrived there, MDOC had allowed smoking to be accepted. It had been outlawed for a long time, and so everyone had access to whatever they wanted to smoke, and they had access to lighters and whatnot. But what this resulted in was just a huge clouds of smoke back there. And then if something had happened, if lunch had arrived late, or someone wasn't taken out for their shower or to yard or something, the inmates, and you know, rightly, I suppose, would create these fires, you know. So they're in their cells, they can't be let out, but they can like sort of throw out pieces of cardboard or pieces of paper or whatever, and actually create fires as a form of protest. So my point is, you would go back there, and it's inordinately loud, and then there's all this smoke and actual, you know, flames going on while you're trying to teach, say, you know, the poetry of Etheridge Knight or whoever it was. So in a certain sense, no, it was absolutely a nightmare scenario to attempt to teach anything. On the other hand, it was great in that the writing that we somehow was able to get out of all that chaos translated, I think, into into an authentic, shall I say, a literary voice onto the page, which is Unit 29. So Unit 29, this collection is interesting in that it is a literary work of art. There's no doubt about that, but it doesn't have any literary pretensions for the most part. It's almost pure, what I'm calling Mississippi, you know, prison realism. Okay, so like that, I think we did achieve our goal. I mean, there's a little, every now and then, you know, you'll see a little bit of poeticisms going on, but by and large, somehow 3 years of working in these insane conditions, or at least 2 solid years of that before we finally got a classroom. We were able to walk away with something that, at least by Mississippi standards, is quite unusual. Now I wasn't given any particular, well, I was given a little bit of guidelines for this show. I think the question is going to come in a little while. I do want to read a piece of prose from the collection, and then maybe after that, I can take questions and whatnot. You have to understand that. So, as I say, I think there's 32 of our students in this collection. All of them and spread out in 4 different buildings in Unit 29. All the buildings except for the last 2 semesters in which we did have a workshop up front in the gymnasium, but the rest of these people are existing in segregation. No one had a background in writing, and not really even thought about it until we offered, these workshops. And I'm astounded by the fact that they were able to come to write in this fashion, and some of it is actually quite intriguing. There's so many pieces that I could read that we could discuss. I think for right now, you know what? I think I'm going to start with there was a student, Anthony Wilson, who's no longer at Parchman. He was moved to, so one thing that happens in 29 is, particularly if you're in segregation. Now, 29 is a big unit, so you do have like open pod areas in which inmates can walk around during the day or whatever. So you do have that part of 29, but about a third of 29, as I've already said, is segregation. It's also J Block, which is Mississippi's death row for men. That's also in 29. There's currently there's only one female death row inmate, but the female inmates are housed around Jackson, Mississippi, which is about 3 hours south of where we are at Parchman. There's only one right currently on death row, but she's in Jackson. Anyway, so my point is the third of Unit 29 is segregated in some way or is death row. But then the other 2/3, sort of open pods and whatnot. But this fellow I want to read now, Anthony Wilson, he was in segregation. So what happens, and my point was, what happens in segregation is that, you're not able to move about freely. You might go to yard maybe at most 3 times a week, usually twice a week, if you can find guards to take you out there. And then showers too. That's the part that really disturbed me. Was they only get a shower in segregation like once a week or something like this. Anyway, Anthony Wilson. Also, Anthony Wilson. He starts off the book. I'm gonna read this piece called "From the Depths of the Beast." One thing that we did this time that was unusual or different for us from the other 3 collections was that I asked my students if they would attempt to draw something to give a greater depth to their writing. And I asked everyone to participate in this. Only a few did, but we did come away with some really great images. And Anthony, had this hidden talent as a painter, but he was transferred about 2.5 hours. That would be 2.5 hours east of Parchman, in a town in Mississippi called Meridian. There's a facility there called East Mississippi Correctional Facility, and it's kind of like, it's actually worse than Parchman, because what happens when you're in segregation in Parchman is eventually you just you lose it. you lose all your senses, because it's a really, I'm talking particularly of segregation. Um, you eventually just lose all sense of reality. And when that happens, and it invariably happens with at least a third of the people in segregation, then they get sent to this place in Meridian, Mississippi, East Mississippi Correctional Facility, which is kind of the, like, I don't know, the effluvia. Sort of when people finally melt down at Parchment, they kind of get sent to this place. And Anthony got sent there. You couldn't take it anymore. But I was very impressed with Anthony because he didn't actually. I saw him one day and I kind of talked him into taking the class. He didn't really even signify that he was a very quiet fella and he wasn't even that much interested in what we were doing. But then I saw something in him. I'm like, I'd like for you to try to write your narrative. And then eventually I asked him, to draw his narrative in a sense, and he did fabulous work. And there's 3 pieces in the collection from Anthony, if you have the collection. But the collection starts off with Anthony's piece, and he had never written. This is the first thing he'd ever written in his life, according to what he told me. He wrote. This is from 2023, I believe. From the depths of the beast. Now I have to stipulate that we had reading assignments attached to this. It wasn't completely an experiment and trying to get people to write without literature. As I say, I didn't want any kind of pretense, but there was a great deal of reading actually, because he needed some kind of template to guide. There needed to be some kind of guidance, for people who had never attempted a literary effort. And one of the books that we did read thoroughly was Jack Abbott's In the Belly of the Beast. Norman Mailer found him, published him, and made him famous. But Anthony really connected with this book, and I guess in this opening essay from our book, Unit 29, is kind of his sort of interpretation of what the belly of the beast is all about for him. But he writes, from the depths of the beast arises a chance for freedom from within. After 10.5 years in solitary confinement, I have finally regained a chance at staying in general population. Yeah, because he's been segregated for a long time, right? And so like general population becomes like something to work toward. In any case, he continues, it is a greater freedom than I have had in over the past decade of my life, and a much more preferable living area while waiting and working toward a chance at release from prison to a second chance in life. The ability to be able to work around the prison, go to the dining hall, etc., all seems so small, but for someone whom has given up on retaining these privileges again some years ago, it is a blessing. The freedom of space and activity is something a body needs. Walks in the rain to the dining hall is just as relaxing on the inside as the old tin roofs on raining days. Freedom of social environments have been deprived the past decade due in long-term lockdown time. Playing cards, lack of mail, calls, all that gives a sense of our own freedom on the inside. In another 6 years, I'm looking to hope the laws will let me parole out of prison to begin a new life and build me a family, growing children, loving wife, and a house made into a home. I was released in October of 2010 on parole at the age of 20 years old from a 2-year prison sentence. After 10 months in the prison on a violation for an underage DUI at the age of 19 years old, walking into the back door of the administration building at Walnut Grove Youth Correctional Facility, The air around me had the smell of fresh air. It has a different smell from inside the facility grounds for some reason. As I passed through the breezeway into the administration building, I was already in free world clothes, jeans and polo with tennis shoes on. Waiting in the front lobby for me was my grandmother, who had stood beside me through my little sentence and made sure I had store and hygiene every week. My mother, who also had been there through the sentence, my brother, my ex Brittany, I was with when I first got locked up, and Brooke, Brittany, and Chris's daughter, she had the August before I got the DUI. She was walking now. At my arrest, she was only 2.5 months old. Brittany, of course, like most women these days, was off with with other men most of my sentence. A letter from time to time. She just happened to be at my pop's house the day I called to let them know of my release date and if they were coming to pick me up. That weekend, she moved back to my mama's house and came with them to pick me up the following week. It felt so good stepping outside the facility and firing up a cigarette on the way to the car. The little Delta 88 my grandma had at the time was full. Walking out, I had cigarettes in my pocket and a little under an ounce of weed. I was free and on my way. It's no other feeling of freedom that could feel so good as having gone from confinement to complete freedom. To be close to loved ones whom visited every other week my whole sentence. The comfort of presence of conversation about real world things. They all wanted to hear about how the time was while I was trying to catch up on the world since I'd been gone. When I came back this time, my actions resulted in a total loss of freedom completely, which in the end taught me a very valuable lesson on its value in life. A little too late, though, after it's gone. All I can hope for is that one day God opens a door that will grant me the complete freedom of release, second chance at life. Now that I've been through all this and have learned life's lessons and losing it, I have a different sense of value and worth in it. And here's the paragraph I really like. I enjoy every little extra freedom I gain on the inside. It gives me little strength to hold on that life isn't completely over. One sentence to life without parole after leaving from a CWC, which is a work center. It was supposed to be fun for us, but in the end, a couple of days after leaving, the assault of an elderly lady during the break-in of a house and stealing her car ended with her dying from a single stab wound. Intended to stop the hollering and commotion, not for a kill, took all our freedom away when she died. Not a day goes by I don't wish I could rewind the hands of time for the two of us and bring back life, hers and mine together. Though her life was at its end, mine was only in the beginning, and it ended before you really got started. I pray for her. I'm sorry. I pray, I pray for her and pray the Lord both forgives me for the stupid choices me and my brother made that day. The day comes, I regain my freedom, more than the freedom on the inside. I shall cherish it the rest of my days. Until then, I'll take pride in my progress on the inside and make the best of the freedom I have inside these walls. Anthony Wilson. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is Dostoevsky, said that we can get used to anything. When you are, I mean, these are living human beings existing in time, and like regardless of what brought them there, as I say, I am not interested in the crimes that led to all this. I'm interested in the actual experience of the existing human being in these extreme situations. But you know, it's amazing how, you know, as Anthony says, you will grasp on to the smallest of things. Um, and that and that is, you know, that is the life that you're going through.
Louis, is there anything else short that you want to read us before we just have a little bit of discussion? There doesn't have to be, but I'm just checking.
Yeah, I can read one more thing. I'll read a pretty short poem that actually closes out the collection. Um, yeah, it's on page 214 of the book, and it's by one of our students, Leon Johnson. And Leon started off in segregation, but worked his way to general population, in which he never wanted to go back to segregation, and he made it a point to to, to toe a straight path for himself. Um, Now he was, I met Leon when we moved up front to the gymnasium when we had an actual class of sorts. Um, but he wrote this poem. I asked, he did not want to write poetry, but I kind of kept asking if he would try it, and he came away with a handful of poems I thought were actually quite brilliant. But the name of this, I'm sorry. The name of this poem is called Not Institutionalized by Leon Johnson. And he writes, I try to live by the mind of Christ and not look toward man. I don't allow anything to bother me. It's all about today, not yesterday, or what tomorrow may bring. I obey these that have authority over me. I do what they ask me or tell me to do, and I do what I'm supposed to do when there's no one around standing over me. I put no one before anyone else, bond or free. Are there anyone better than you are? I'm really free within. Prison don't have any real chains on me. Now, I know there's a certain criticism that's going to come in this poem, in that he's kind of accepting his oppressors. I completely get that. I mean, you know, before I started teaching the prisons, I also taught philosophy. I read my Sartre. I understand there's kind of a problem that Leon is accepting some things, and a lot of us would think that you should fight to the bitter end. But why I like this piece is because that Leon showed me something, that his acceptance is also a part of his freedom. You see, you know, we as intellectuals and so forth, you know, we've got to be careful with our grandiose notions of resisting all these things that are right to be seen that way as something to resist. I'm not saying that. I think we should, you know, we should fight the revolution to the very end. But Leon is a man who's never going to get out of the Mississippi penal system, because when in Mississippi, you know, if you're charged with murder, that's it. There is no parole. You're in for life, except for very rare, you know, situations of a retrial or a pardon from the governor or whatever. So at some point, you know, for him to deal with what was going on with him, he had to make kind of a pact with himself, and there were certain things that he was going to, Leon is going to have a life there regardless of the circumstances, and this is his way of dealing with it, and I respect it. You know, I really do.
Um, thank you for reading his poem and also for the other prose piece. Um, I'd love to, and for all the context you set, all the introduction you gave us to the setting, to what the place is from that you entered to have people experience sharing this work, this truly expressive writing. Um, really stunning experience that you're sharing. And one of the questions that Susan Villardo asked has to do with literacy.
Mhm.
Um, and her question is, were individuals able to contribute to the book who may have had low or lower level reading and writing abilities? How would their voices captured? So that seems to be a
Very
very
good question. You're right. Very good question because I don't know. I don't know if it's because you have to understand this is not like a required class, right? This was all voluntary. So how we got the class was I went back into the zones and asked if there's anyone who would like to try to write for a book that we were working on. And apparently, the people who could even grasp the concept of putting together a book must have had a certain degree of literacy. Because yes, of course, we had students who grappled with grammar and spelling, but that wasn't really an issue for us. I mean, that, if they could just somehow record the rhythms of their experience, the rhythms, the internal movements of themselves onto the page, that was as far as we needed to go. But it's a good question because actually, we didn't encounter the most extreme illiteracy as you might think. As I say, maybe that's because the people who understood that we were actually putting together a book, uh,
they
regard,
self-selected. They
they
could do.
kind of got it,
Yeah. Did you, so a related question then to that would be, Louis, what if any editing was done? So certainly you made decisions about the order, how things would
Yeah.
appear. And were there any pieces you didn't include?
Oh,
Were,
sure. Yeah. I mean, actually, what's in this book is probably maybe 30% of everything that we got from this 3-year experience. Um, yeah, there was a lot of writing that just was not usable. Um, there was in terms of editing, there was some editing, but really not that much. And maybe that's because I picked the pieces that didn't
Mhm.
require that much.
I see. Yeah.
Um, I mean, obviously, we left a lot of the misspellings and obviously we left a lot of the punctuation and that because what we were interested in was getting down kind of the authenticity of voice. So to answer your question, there was some editing, but not to the extent that we didn't want it to be standardized anyway.
Right.
So
Right.
there was some editing, but not an incredible amount of editing. It was
Yeah.
just enough to make it, readable, I guess.
We've got another couple of questions I want to get to really quickly, if we can, Louis. Does the program, Rosalind is asking, does the program continue today? Do other inmates get to read this book? I guess I want to ask within the context of that question as well, have the inmates who contributed read the book? And if so, what kinds of responses have you gotten from anybody who's been through the writing process, even from the initial writing to the publication? Curious about that.
Yeah, good question. Now, because of where we were, and of course now we're 3.5 years down the road from the inception of this collection. Um, Probably 20% of the people we worked with have passed on. Death is a
Mm.
main thing back there. Another problem was transfers. So we had a lot of people who were transferred out. Some people did their time. There were a few people who actually did their sentence, and we sort of lost contact with them. But the majority of the folks, I am still in contact. We're not currently working at Parchman. We're working in other facilities. But I am in
Okay.
contact with them via phone or via letters. And whenever possible, I have sent the book to those who are in it. And also we compensate them monetarily if we can find them. And anyway, the reception from the writers themselves, obviously they're very proud of it. For all of them, it's the first time, being published in anything. And what's even stranger is that I'm still very much in contact with some of the students at 29. And someone was telling me the other day, I was on the phone with them, that actually one, like a couple of the administrator wardens or superintendents or whatever, like they had gotten a hold of a copy and they liked it. Which I would have never thought that, right?
Wow. Wow.
Um,
Oh, beautiful, beautiful.
yeah,
That's a
I would never have thought that there was any warden who would have said otherwise.
right, right. So there's
Because it is a condemnation, and I have
yeah.
no issue with exposing that, you know. But
Uh,
according to what
I
I heard, they were okay with it too. You have to
that is
understand,
amazing.
this is Mississippi. This is the poorest state in the country,
Yeah.
and it's like one of my students said it best. It's like when you're at Parchment, anything can happen and anything can mean anything. So the fact that we were able to put this book together for all the people involved, whether it be a guard or inmate or whoever, is kind of like a collective accomplishment in spite of ourselves.
It's such a sort of iconic piece of expressive writing, really.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, I
that
guess that's
is
your theme. Yeah, because you're a journal of
yes,
expressive
yes.
writing. So
This is
yeah, yeah.
this is the very core process that is happening. So there's so many things we want to, that I'm not going to have time. I'm going to have to narrow this down to one last question for you, which comes from Steph and also from Hector. My question, how do you do this? How do you prepare yourself to do this work? This is a very real question. I have enormous respect
Yeah.
for your work. Um, and so I guess we're going to go out on that with you, Lewis, even though there's a million
Sure.
other questions I haven't had time to ask.
Well,
How do
yeah.
you do the work?
Well, I appreciate that question. It's a fair question. And before we lose each other, thank you very much for letting us be on your show. Um, as I say, so we started this program, gosh, how many years ago? In 2013 is when we began it. So in 2014, we entered Parchment for the first time. And it was simply because I had taken over the duties of Vox as the executive director, and the whole mission of Vox is to seek out people who you never hear from in writing, right? So that's the basic concept. And at the time, anyway, I mean, it's changed somewhat after all these years, but at the time, no one had really solicited inmate writing in Mississippi and put it into books. And so that's how it started. And we really didn't meet any resistance or anything because no one had really done it before in Mississippi. You have to understand that where you are, where these programs, have been going on for decades now. Like it's just not that big of a deal. But in Mississippi, it had never been done, because there wasn't the economic resources to do it. So I'm like, okay, well, if this is my job is to seek out marginal writers, particularly in Mississippi, well then I want to get it from the prisons. I just had an interest in doing that since it hadn't been done before around here,
Mm.
and that's where it started. And so we started at Parchment, and then they would actually, one time a journalist came with us to write an article about it, and then that was published, and then other facilities.
Whoops. We lost him. Okay. He got bounced out somehow. All right, we will welcome him back when he does get back, if he does get back. He did mention that he was having, prior to this, some challenges with his internet, and he had to go somewhere else to get on it. So let's keep our eyes open for whether or not he comes back. But I definitely think we should move on to the open mic now, and I'm going to stop the recording.